Today I'm setting up my perfumery workstation in my new place, so I thought I'd take you guys along with me and show you guys how to set up your own perfumery workstation at home for the very first time. If it's something you haven't done before, I'm going to show you all the different pieces of equipment that I have with me at my desk, so it's all set up ready to go and make perfumes. Okay, so before we actually get to the workstation, the desk itself, I want to show you what I've got behind it, because I've got set up here a load of shelves, and these specifically are for storing all of my pre-dilution. So these are what you use to firstly learn your raw materials, and then what I use later on also for blending. So these are all arranged alphabetically, and that's how I like to do things. And that's because I've got a very large collection of over 400 raw materials. And when you get that big, I find that alphabetical is the only kind of way that really allows you to find things quickly. That said though, when you're starting, if you've only got 30 or 50 raw materials, you could feasibly have all of this just on your desk, and you can try other methods of arranging things. For example, you could arrange from top to mid to base note, or you could arrange by category, you know, how they smell, things like that. I just find as you grow later on, it becomes useful to use things like shelves for storage. But as well as shelves, you can also use boxes or chests of drawers, especially if you're tight for space, that can be useful. Now I find no matter which method you choose for storing your raw materials, I really like to use these Winchester sample bottles. I'll show you what they look like close up. So there's a number of reasons that I like these bottles. The first reason is that these are 15 milliliters, which means you can get about 10 grams or so of pre-dilution. But what's very good about these bottles is if you look at them, they've got a polycone liner inside the cap. So these caps, they've got a urea plastic outer shell, which is extremely chemical resistant. So that means that the plastic's not gonna break down and go into your raw materials, and it's not gonna let the raw material leak through it. And that polycone liner creates an exceptionally tight seal. So what that means is, essentially, once you've got your pre-dilutions or your blends in these bottles, nothing's going to evaporate out of it. You're not going to get alcohol evaporating out and making them more and more concentrated over time, which you wouldn't want. That's a problem that can happen with some bottles. And essentially you've got a very tight seal, they're not going to leak, and also these bottles are nice and heavy, which means they're much less likely to knock over on your desk. And it's easy to think, oh, I'm never going to knock over any bottles. But believe me, when you've been doing this for long enough, it's almost inevitable that at some point you're going to accidentally knock over a bottle and spill some raw materials. If you've got very tall, thin bottles like I used to have, which I don't use anymore, it's much easier to do that, and you find yourself knocking over things with just the lightest little brush. Now, about these pre-dilutions as well as labeling them nicely, I like to put labels on the top. So if you see those labels, this, I'm not sure if you can see that, but I like to have the alphabetical kind of letter, the first letter up there in big, because that helps me organize them alphabetically, and also the name of the raw material and its dilution level. And this really helps if you've got shelves like I have, but also if you're using boxes or chests of drawers or anything else like that to organize your raw materials, because when you've got a big load of things next to each other, you can't see all the side labels because you're usually looking top down. So if you go and get some top labels like that, it can be very useful in allowing you to quickly get the raw materials that you want. Okay, so that's the bank of all of my raw materials behind me. In fact, the actual bottles of raw materials themselves, I like to keep elsewhere in a garage or something like that. And I just like to keep the pre-dilutions on hand, because once you've made your pre-dilutions, you don't really need to use your actual pure raw materials very often at all, only when you're really making final batches or refilling your pre-dilutions. But aside from that, let's now get on to the actual workstation itself. So the most important thing, or like let's say the centerpiece of your workstation, is usually your perfumery scale. Now the scale or the balance is what you're going to be using to firstly make all of these pre-dilutions, but then later on it's what you're going to be using to actually go and make your blends, both your accords and then later on your actual perfumes themselves. Now with scales, there's quite a different range of things you can buy. Some of them can be as cheap as kind of like £20 or $20 if you're in the USA, ranging all the way up to over £1,000 or $1,000. So you may be looking at scales and trying to work out, well, what kind of specification do I need? How much do I actually need to spend on this kind of thing? Now, if you're just starting out for the very first time ever, you can get kind of pocket scales or jewelry scales on Amazon, and usually you can pick those up very cheap. And those are not something that I would recommend for your kind of day-to-day perfumery, especially if you're serious about getting into it. But if you're just getting started for the very first time and you're on a very tight budget, then this is a good way to get started. Now, these pocket or jewelry scales, usually they come to 2 decimal places. So that is the number of zeros, so 0.00 would be 2 decimal places, and that's when you're weighing out the grams of something, and you weigh out all your trials in perfumery in grams. Now, personally, I like to go for a more accurate 3 decimal place scale. And what I like to use is a proper kind of lab scale. So rather than just, something closer to a kitchen scale or a home kind of pocket scale, while these are a lot cheaper and, they're available for kind of £20, $20, that kind of price, they're not quite as accurate. And in perfumery, the accuracy is very important because you need to make sure that when you're weighing out your formulas or making your dilutions, you need to make sure that you've got accurate amounts being weighed out. Otherwise, you won't actually have in the bottle what you think you have, and that's going to cause you a lot of problems down the line. Now, the problem with a lab scale, on the other hand, is that these can get very expensive, and a lot of the price of these is just to the kind of level of quality, and you get a lot of different companies at different price points where the scale looks the same on the face of it, but one may be very slightly more accurate or reliable kind of underneath, inside the machinery than the other. So it comes to this point of where you're trying to get a scale that's accurate enough, but it's not too expensive. So what I've got here is one of the Fragrance Foundry scales, and this is the one that we sell on the Fragrance Foundry. So if you want to get one of these, a link is in the description. And this is essentially the same as a lot of the kind of off-brand scales you can pick up on Amazon. A lot of different manufacturers do them. Essentially, this is kind of like a, let's say, cheap Chinese made lab scale. So I'd say this is 80 to 90% as good as one of the more professional lab scales you get from a very kind of reliable or well-known manufacturer, but at about half of the price. So essentially, you've got a lot of trusted manufacturers, people like Ohaus and Kern and other scale manufacturers who kind of, have been making in the business of making proper lab scales for a long time. And then more recently, you've got some of these cheaper Chinese versions pop up on the market, and they essentially work the same, though I suspect the accuracy level may be just slightly a little bit less, and the kind of, they're a bit more chunky, a little bit more bulky. They don't necessarily come with as good warranties, things like that, but essentially they do the job and they cover pretty much everything you need it to do. So, if you're on a budget, these scales are absolutely fine. The important fact about these is that they go to 3 decimal places pretty accurately, and that is really useful in perfumery when you're trying to weigh out, things like single drops or a couple of drops of something. This is a lot better at doing that than those 2 decimal place scales. So this kind of lab scale is what I would recommend for most people, or if you're going to that next level where you're starting a business or you're doing, you're really seriously getting into perfumery, you've been doing it for years and you're doing it all the time, these scales would still be fine for that as well. But if you're ever looking for that kind of, let's say, just next level of a bit more premium quality, let's say, you could always then, if you wanted to, go and invest in a more kind of, let's say, well-known brand lab scale. Like I say, it's not going to help you that much more. It's more that they can just sometimes feel like they have a little bit better of a build quality. They can be slightly quicker on the responsiveness of, the readings of the numbers and things like that. So anyway, long story short, probably the biggest investment and the most important thing that you want to invest in with your perfumery is your scale. Because if you invest in a good quality scale, it allows you to weigh out smaller amounts more accurately, because that allows you to use less raw materials in the long run and therefore save more money overall. Okay, so the next thing you need is pipettes, and I like to buy large boxes of 500 at a time because you get through a lot of pipettes in perfumery, and this is the most cost-effective way of doing that. So I just like to get a load and have those in the corner of my desk. Now, to go with the pipettes, what I like to do is get a jar, and this is for the used pipettes. So I'm just using an old sauerkraut jar here, but it could be anything really. It could be any kind of pot or jar that you find. It doesn't have to be fancy. This is essentially, once you've taken a pipette and once you've gone and used it to weigh out your raw material, then you'll go and put your used pipette in the jar. And that's just to kind of collect it and keep it before you go and throw them away, because obviously bits can drip out of the bottom. So I just find it very useful to have a used pipette jar on the desk. Then, as well as that, you've also got your scent strips. So when you actually come to doing your evaluations, either for your pre-dilutions or your test blends that you go and make, you'll want to be doing all of those on scent strips, because you don't want to be smelling it out of the bottle when you're doing perfumery. I've explained reasons for that before. So you can either get scent strips in nice little booklets like this, or you can get bags of loose scent strips. And If you've got loose scent strips, then again, I like to get a little pot or a jar to keep those in. Otherwise, if you've got booklets, you can just have that on the desk as well. Now, next we get to storage. So I've got an array of different kind of perfumery racks here, and I like to have these around the back of the desk. I find these very useful for organizing raw materials that you're working with at the time. So I like to call these palettes, a bit like a painter's palette. But essentially, if you've got a big library of raw materials, when you're working on a particular project, you're going to be using certain ones again and again. Say you're working on a particular accord. So in that case, what you would do is you would take a little one of these racks or something for your project, and then you can just go and leave the raw materials for the accord or the perfume that you're working on in that rack, so that when you need to go and do your next versions of your blend, your next iterations, you've already got them all to hand. And then as I go and work on different projects, then I can go and switch the raw materials out and use that rack for a different set of raw materials. These are also actually very nice if you have different workstations. For example, say you do your blending in one room and you do your evaluations in another room, maybe you've got fresh air or something like that. Well, then the racks actually help you carry the raw materials around as well. So I just think these are very useful to have, kind of lining the back of your workstation. Obviously, it's all optional, and it depends, how much stuff you're doing. But personally, I like to be organized. I like to have those on hand. Okay, so the next thing that I like to have on hand is one of these perfumer's alcohol bottles. So these are very useful when you're weighing out your perfumer's alcohol. And that's just because you need perfumer's alcohol essentially for all of your dilution. So it's something you find yourself weighing out time and time again. Now, obviously you can just have your bottle of perfumer's alcohol with you and just pipette it out as normal, that's fine. But usually you're using slightly larger amounts, especially when you're making dilutions. If you're trying to weigh out about 10 grams at a time or something like that, it's a lot quicker and easier just to take this bottle with this little nozzle, and when you've got your sample bottle to make your dilution with, you can just go in at the start and squirt in some perfumer's alcohol, then weigh it, work out how much of your raw material to add, and then go and add that. It can just save a lot of time. So I like to have one of these on the end of the desk. And occasionally the water can drip out of this nozzle, so I like to have a little bit of kitchen towel below that as well, just so if it does do a little drip or two, that alcohol will be soaked straight up. Okay, so on the subject of making dilutions and having that perfume's alcohol bottle, to go along with that is a calculator. And call me old-fashioned, but I like to calculate the pre-dilutions using a calculator. Now, of course, you could do this on your phone, but I still have this left over from high school. And it's very, very useful. So I generally like to have this at my perfumery workstation, which means when I'm calculating my pre-dilutions, for example, at 10%, I can just weigh out the amount of alcohol, divide it by 9, and know how much raw material to add on my scale. And there we go, I've got pre-dilution. Okay, so after that, I've got some spatulas here. So I've got a big spatula, and I've also got a small one. You only really need a small one if you're starting out. But these are for weighing out powders, because as you may know, not all of the raw materials are liquids, so you can't actually go and pipette all of them. So I like to have a spatula on hand, so when I need to go and weigh out a solid, for example, something like vanillin powder, or even sometimes very thick, viscous, resinous substances, I can then go and use a spatula to obviously weigh those out into my sample bottle using the scale, and then just add my alcohol or whatever else I need to add. To kind of finish off pretty much the workstation, I like to have some scent strip holders. So these are just these kind of blocks with a clip on the end, but these allow you to take all your scent strips when you've been dipping them into your raw materials, your blends, and it allows you to kind of hold them up, which is very nice. So you can put that on the table, and then you've got your blends, and if you want to smell them, you can then just go and evaluate them like that. So I'm sure you can imagine these are pretty useful. And what it does is it kind of allows you to keep all of the scent strips off of the desk. So instead of having scent strips, strewn around all over your desk, you can keep them nice and organized, and also not touching the table, because you don't want them touching the table, because obviously they'll then contaminate your desk. And if you touch another one to it, it will go and cross-contaminate. That said, you don't have to buy scent strip holders. It's not a necessity. You can always just take your scent strip and fold it up at the end like that, and then put it on the table so the tip won't still touch the desk. But that said, I like to have the scent strip holders because I just think they look nice. I think they make the workspace presentable, and it just makes it so easy to go and pick things up and smell them and have them organized. So I like to have kind of a battery of scent strip holders as well. So that's pretty much it. One other finishing touch I forgot to mention earlier is I usually like to cut out a little square of cardboard for the scale. And I like to just put that on top of the weighing pan, because it firstly protects it if you get any drops of raw material over it, which could otherwise go and stain it. But also I found that very occasionally, because these scales are very, very sensitive, you can sometimes have static slightly interfering with the kind of weighing and make it a little less stable. If you ever have that problem, a sheet of cardboard on top like this can also help with that as well. So it's kind of a dual purpose really. I just like to have this on top really to protect the scale. And then in practice, the workstation usually has a lot more bottles all over the place as well. So I'll have, you know, maybe some of my empty sample bottles, either the kind of sample bottles which I make my blends into or the ones ready for dilutions. I often have a pack of those lying around or maybe on the floor next to the desk or nearby, something like that. And then obviously I've got all the blends, and usually, well, I like to not have too many blends all over the desks. I often have, if I'm working on a project, kind of a little section of the desk where I'll have some bottles, you know, relating to that project, maybe the things I've just gone and made, or maybe I'll put them in some of these little organization racks, just depending on what I feel like. But that's pretty much it. That's kind of the bulk of the workstation. That's how I like to kind of arrange it. And yeah, that's what it's like. So I'll give you a little close-up shot now so you can have a complete look. So here's what it looks like kind of from the overhead view when you're actually using it. So on this side is most of my kind of consumables, tools and equipment things. And then in the middle, of course, we've got the centerpiece, which is a scale. So we can go and weigh those raw materials out to a very accurate, if we look at that, 3 decimal places. So that is very sensitive. That means you can weigh down to the nearest drop. That's why I prefer it to the 2 decimal place scales, because they can't fully capture the weight of a drop properly. And then we've got all of these storage racks, which means you've got plenty of space to kind of organize various different sets of raw materials for different projects. And then I guess the only thing that's really missing here, which I haven't got with me right now, is I usually like to have kind of my laptop or iPad or something like that with formula. So as you may well know, I like to write all my formulas in my perfumery app formula. So often I'd like to have that, you know, in the corner as well. So if I'm making a formula, I can quickly refer to the app telling me exactly what I need to weigh out, so I can look at that while I'm on the scale. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I hope you found all of this somewhat interesting. Now, if you are looking for where to get any of that stuff, we sell all of that over at the Fragrance Foundry, my online store. So if you're interested in any of this equipment, and actually most of this stuff we now do in a starter kit, which conveniently bundles up kind of all of the essentials so you can just get it in one big box. All of that equipment is available in the description, ships worldwide. So if you're interested in any of it, you can either go search around online and pick these up from various places, or you can just head over to the Fragrance Foundry and get exactly the same equipment that I use myself. So now we've got this workstation set up, I will soon be doing some more videos for you guys actually using this workstation to make some stuff. So hopefully I'll see you very soon, and hopefully then we'll actually be making use of all this stuff to be doing some blending. Until then, I wish you well, and I'll see you next time.